Trade talks between the United States and China have ended with no new deal, and tensions are running a little bit high right now. To tell us more about it is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again via Skype from Los Angeles. Lisa, the Trump administration has slapped $200 billion of new tariffs on Chinese goods, and now China has retaliated. When are they set to meet again, or will they meet again?
Yeah, the tariffs were slapped on the day that the Chinese representative actually came to meet with Donald Trump. So this has no bearing on the meetings. It has a bearing on the resolution. I think that's the goal that Donald Trump has here. It's that it's fine. They keep meeting, but they can't agree on the concessions. And, we had candidate Trump promise that he would fix this China situation even before he even had any desire to run for presidency. He would talk about the fact that China takes advantage of this lax global economic environment. And it's not just trade. I think people need to understand more of it comes from the stealing of patents, intellectual property, et cetera, that we're more concerned about. And how are we going to enforce that with a trade partner who's not looking to play by the rules? It's interesting because these tariffs, you would think, they are definitely taking a toll on the Chinese economy. I have sources on the ground there who talk about factories being shut down, the banks really suffering. You'd think that they would want to play fairly in order to continue playing, but they're not going to take this one sitting down. I think that we're going to see a lot of back and forth before we have any resolution, and Donald Trump's not going to back down. This is something that he, again, feels very strongly about, and will continue to add on the punitive measures. And in the interim, the costs of many, many items are skyrocketing in both places.
Trump says that China's been taking advantage of the United States for many years, and Beijing says no one should expect China to swallow bitter fruit. Just dealing with dictatorships must be a real challenge for the Trump administration. First Kim Jong-un in North Korea, and now this.
Yes, I think on the foreign policy front, you have Donald Trump dealing with North Korea, with China, with the Iranian regime, and you don't generally see a president who will seek re-election, will seek a second term, going after these hot button issues that are not guaranteed a resolution, are not guaranteed to come out positively. It's provoking, these wild beasts that may not respond in the way that he hopes or he calculates. All three nations are rogue nations. All three are dictatorships. All three have taken advantage of a very lax U.S. foreign policy for over 8 years. And when all three, you've seen headlines like this before, are almost saying, let's maybe play out the clock and we can hope for a Democrat to win in 2020 so we have a better chance of basically manipulating that candidate, that president. It looks really bad. I say that here to the naysayers who really oppose the Trump foreign policy. When our enemies are waiting for him to leave office, he's doing the right thing, or at least standing up to our adversaries can only be a positive thing in protecting U.S. assets and trade, economy, et cetera.
Now, despite a recent U.S. military buildup in the Middle East, Lisa, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says the U.S. is not aiming for a war with Iran. He said the aim is really to change the behavior in Iran's leadership.
Yes. Well, that behavior includes importing billions of dollars into the global terror initiatives that Iran has always supported, including suicide bombers, including Hezbollah and Hamas, including having their tentacles in places like Syria and Iraq and Yemen, in Lebanon, in Gaza, and the list goes on and on. And the Trump White House has said many times, when Nikki Haley was at the UN, she said this, Mike Pompeo has said this, Donald Trump has said this, that they're not directly looking for regime change, but they're looking for behavioral change. And that's because what would regime change even look like for Iran? What is the next government? What's the viable government? What's the replacement government? So instead, they're looking to place enough economic and political pressure on the current regime to see some significant changes in their behavior. And we haven't seen that. All we have seen is a reciprocated, chest thumping and threats and provocations. They went after Saudi tankers in the seas around the UAE early this morning. They continue to threaten and to really spread this negative anti-US, anti-Israel propaganda within the country itself, and we're not really seeing any changes. But what we do know is that the sanctions are hurting, they're working, and it looks like we'll have to continue this course for a while before we see any changes.
Lisa, Iran is facing unprecedented pressure from the international sanctions. Reports say the sanctions against the Islamic State cut deep, but Iran seems unlikely to budge.
Yeah, they will play this card of, again, flexing their muscles and looking to be strong and almost ignoring the fact that the sanctions are hurting so badly. And of course they are. But the one thing that the regime has always done is to pass, or whatever they can do, to pass along the burden of sanctions onto the people so that they can also use that as a propaganda piece to tell the people of Iran, don't blame the government. Blame the big Satan, which they refer to as the United States as the big Satan. They will do what they can to make the people suffer, to raise the prices of common goods, of pharmaceutical supplies, etc. But they're really suffering. And this time around, the sanctions that are placed by the Trump White House are quite targeted, meaning it's meant to really paralyze the government more so than the people, although that's impossible. The government will always pass along that burden to the people. But we're looking at the oil sector, we're looking at the weapons sector, we're looking at the banking sector, we're looking at areas where it will have a more direct effect on the government more so than the people.
Lisa, an Israeli minister has warned of attacks on Israel if tensions between the U.S. and Iran escalate. Iran says the U.S. does not dare to attack for fear of provoking an assault on Israel.
Yes, so the same way that the Iranian regime will call the U.S. the big Satan, they call Israel the little Satan, meaning they work hand in hand, Israel and the United States. And while the U.S. is farther from Iran's reach for some sort of weapons, missile, etc., Israel is not. Israel's right in their neighborhood. And that has always been kind of like the hostage they take. Well, you don't want to mess with us because we'll just attack Israel. This has been the kind of the threat that they've always used. We can even be more, I should say, more scared of the fact that, well, now Iran is also in Venezuela, so they're at the southern footstep of the United States as well. If they really wanted to attack or launch or have like a pass-off scenario where Hezbollah is in Venezuela, they exist everywhere. That's my point. Their tentacles are everywhere. But the calculation here is that Israel says, well, we are prepared because of the heightened tensions between the U.S. and Iran. We are prepared. Not only that, but last week when we saw this crisis going on with the Gaza launching missiles, Hamas launching missiles from Gaza into Israel, who's supporting that? Of course, that's coming from the Iranian regime and their funding. So it's another day, business as usual for the Iranian for the Iranian regime and for Israel. So they're used to all of this. This is nothing new. But the calculation here for Iran is that, well, the U.S. won't provoke us further because they're really afraid that we're going to go after Israel. So I think they are assuming that Donald Trump will back down, that he will only go as far as he has. But things are coming to a head. A lot of this is business as usual. A lot of this is what we've been seeing for years and years, the provocations, the threats, etc. But a lot of this is also coming to a head. We withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal over a year ago. Sanctions are being placed. They're buckling under those sanctions. So something's got to give, and we'll see what happens next.
In order for a plan to most effectively work out, you want to have both parties willing to come to the table. Palestinians have rejected a U.S. Middle East peace plan even before knowing what's inside of it.
Great negotiating partner, right? They don't even know what they're getting, but they're already protesting what's inside the deal. What we've been told is that Jared Kushner and many others who are working on this deal have really taken into account both sides. I'm in actually direct contact with their communications team. I've been working on this for a very long time. the word they keep using over and over again is nuance. This is very nuanced. It's detailed. It takes into consideration the history, the cultural sensitivities, the political sensitivities, the religious sensitivities, and it takes into account that both sides need to gain and also make concessions. Now, with that, we've also been told that the term two-state solution will be removed from the plan because it carries so much sensitivity and it means different things to each side. We also know that both sides will have to compromise. We don't know what that compromise is just yet, but this is what we are hearing. Now, for the Palestinians to protest and to kick and scream before this is released is very telling of the reaction they will have. It's also very telling of the media coverage that we're going to see from this, coming from the Middle East, coming from the left, that won't even give it a chance. And that's a shame. It's a shame because, again, these are the issues that no one else wanted to tackle. And the Trump White House is tackling that all in the first term. And to see perhaps some significant changes taking place in the Middle East. I mean, Bill Clinton tried and he gave Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin Nobel Prizes on the White House lawn, and we saw nothing from that. We saw nothing from that, and decades of murder and bloodshed in the region ensued. So if there's a chance that something positive can come from this, I hope that both sides could be open-minded.
There was a deadly hotel attack in Pakistan. A Navy soldier, 4 employees, and 3 gunmen are dead. But fortunately, the guests were unhurt.
Yes, a very poorly calculated, poorly strategized attack by some insurgents in Pakistan. Another day, another attack. You have a lot of these insurgent groups, militant extremists, terrorists that live in Pakistan. For many years, we didn't really hear much about these types of attacks because they were just so prevalent. But now, because they go after these hotels in which international businessmen, international people, tourists travel to, it's reported a bit more widely. And in this case, these were actually Chinese people of Chinese descent who were in this hotel. But as you said, luckily nobody was hurt. The hotel employees were very keen or very astute to catch this before anything could escalate, and only the gunmen were killed.
And still with Pakistan, the country is about to accept a $6 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund. Tell me more about that.
Yes, they're not in good shape. And we knew this because the U.S. was giving them handouts of tremendous amounts for many years. It's something I always would comment on and write about, the fact that the handouts were given, but the behavior and the camaraderie or the friendship, there was no ally in Pakistan for us. There was no protection. There was no sharing of intelligence. They were harboring terrorists for a very long time. So because a lot of that funding has been cut, they're looking for new partners. They're looking for new handouts, and it looks like the IMF will help them out.
Boeing is looking at crash payouts to the families of those affected by the 2 plane crashes over the past 6 months involving their 737 MAX jets. Lisa, the money would be partly based on how long passengers knew they were doomed?
Yes, it sounds very silly. It basically, based on how long you knew, meaning when you were in the air and alive, how long you knew that the plane was going down, that basically is a measurement of how long you suffered. And payouts in litigation cases are always, I only know this because I worked at a litigation firm for one summer during college, but litigation payouts are based on how badly you suffered. So the more you suffer, the more the payout. So in this case, the families of those who perished are going to be paid in accordance to how long their family members suffered, how long they knew they were going down, and how long that anguish really stayed with them to anticipate death, really. It's awful to think about it this way. I think that the headline really popped on the page for that story, and it continues to, because how do you put a value on life, and more or less, or how does a family member really accept that? So it seems a bit stark, but that's the way they're calculating the payouts.
Wow, it's incredible. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.